December 16, 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Through the morning fog, German soldiers moved silently between snow-laden trees, their breath forming clouds in the frozen air. In their pockets, letters from home spoke of final victory. On their lips, mockery of soft American troops who preferred coffee to combat. Wehrmacht intelligence reports declared the enemy exhausted, inexperienced, spread impossibly thin across the front. Every calculation pointed to swift breakthrough. Every officer believed the Americans would crumble within days. By dawn, over 200,000 German troops launched Hitler's desperate gamble, a massive offensive to split Allied forces and capture Antwerp. The artillery barrage shattered the winter silence. American positions, manned by units recovering from previous battles, faced the full weight of Germany's last reserves. In those first hours, German commanders smiled, their panzers rolled forward, their infantry advanced. But they did not know that American resilience, industrial might and logistics would soon transform their offensive into Germany's final Western catastrophe. The German offensive began at 5:30 in the morning on December 16, 1944. Over 1,600 artillery pieces opened fire simultaneously along an 85-mile front in the Ardennes Forest. The barrage lasted 90 minutes, tearing through American positions held by 4 divisions stretched dangerously thin. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt commanded the operation, though Adolf Hitler himself designed the strategic objectives. The Führer demanded nothing less than the capture of Antwerp, Belgium's vital port, believing such a victory would force the Western Allies into negotiations. 3 German armies participated in the assault. In the north, 6th Panzer Army under SS Oberstgruppenführer Josef Dietrich drove toward Liège. The center saw 5th Panzer Army, led by General Hasso von Manteuffel, pushing toward the Meuse River. 7th Army protected the southern flank. Together, they fielded approximately 400,000 men, 1,400 tanks and assault guns, and nearly 2,000 artillery pieces. German planners calculated that surprise, winter weather preventing Allied air operations, and the difficult Ardennes terrain would guarantee success. Wehrmacht intelligence had systematically underestimated American capabilities. Reports described GIs as inexperienced troops lacking combat motivation. German officers believed the Americans, comfortable with abundant supplies and modern equipment, would panic when cut off from their logistical lifelines. One captured German document stated flatly, "The American soldier requires too much comfort to fight effectively in winter conditions." This assessment would prove catastrophically wrong. The initial assault achieved complete tactical surprise. American units holding the Ardennes sector included the inexperienced 106th Infantry Division, recently arrived in Europe, and the battle-weary 28th Infantry Division, resting after heavy combat in the Hürtgen Forest. The German penetration was immediate and deep. By nightfall on December 16th, panzer spearheads had advanced up to 9 miles in some sectors. American communications broke down, units lost contact with headquarters, confusion reigned across the front. Yet, even in those first chaotic hours, signs emerged that German expectations were flawed. American soldiers, though surprised and outnumbered, did not surrender en masse. Small units established defensive positions and fought back. Engineers demolished bridges before German armor could seize them. Artillery batteries fired until overrun, destroying their guns rather than abandoning them intact. The Wehrmacht had expected collapse. Instead, they encountered resistance that slowed their timetables from the very first day. German logistics revealed fundamental weaknesses almost immediately. The offensive depended on capturing American fuel dumps. As Germany's petroleum reserves were nearly exhausted, panzer divisions carried only enough fuel to cover 50 to 70 miles, insufficient to reach the Meuse River, much less Antwerp 120 miles distant. When American defenders destroyed or evacuated fuel stocks before German troops could seize them, the entire operational plan began unraveling. By December 17th, some panzer units were already rationing fuel, their mighty tanks becoming steel coffins if stranded without gasoline. The contrast between German confidence and emerging reality grew starker with each passing hour. While Wehrmacht officers celebrated early gains, American commanders were already rushing reinforcements toward the threatened sector. General Omar Bradley immediately dispatched the 7th Armored Division and elements of the 10th Armored Division to block key road junctions. General Dwight Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, grasped the situation's gravity within 24 hours and began the largest redeployment of American forces in the European theater. Over 240,000 American troops would eventually concentrate in the Ardennes, outnumbering the German attackers. By December 17th, the German advance had created a bulge in American lines, the name that would define the battle. 6th Panzer Army, Germany's strongest formation, struggled against determined resistance at Elsenborn Ridge. American artillery from the 2nd and 99th Infantry Divisions created killing zones that shattered repeated German attacks. The ridge commanded the approach to Liège, and its defense disrupted the entire northern axis of the offensive. German casualties mounted rapidly. The attack that was supposed to achieve breakthrough within days stalled within 48 hours. In the center, 5th Panzer Army advanced more successfully. German troops surrounded 2 regiments of the 106th Infantry Division near the Schnee-Eifel Ridge. Over 8,000 American soldiers found themselves cut off, facing impossible odds. On December 19th, after days of fighting without supplies or reinforcement, these units surrendered, the largest American capitulation in the European theater. German propaganda celebrated this victory, but the delay caused by the 106th's resistance allowed other American units to establish stronger defensive positions further west. The most critical position was the town of Bastogne, a road junction where 7 highways converged. American commanders recognized immediately that whoever controlled Bastogne controlled movement throughout the Ardennes. On December 18th, the 101st Airborne Division, rushed from rest areas in France, arrived in Bastogne barely ahead of German forces. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe took command of the mixed garrison. Paratroopers, armor, artillery, and stragglers from units overrun in the initial assault. Total American strength in Bastogne reached approximately 18,000 men. German forces encircled Bastogne by December 20th. 5th Panzer Army's spearheads bypassed the town, driving west toward the Meuse River, but left siege forces to capture this vital junction. General Heinrich von Luttwitz, commanding the encircling troops, sent a surrender ultimatum on December 22nd. His message demanded immediate capitulation to avoid total annihilation of the garrison. McAuliffe's response became legendary in American military history. His written reply consisted of a single word: nuts. When German officers requested clarification, the American officer delivering the message explained, "It means go to hell." The defense of Bastogne embodied everything German intelligence had misjudged about American soldiers. Surrounded, outnumbered, short of ammunition and medical supplies, subjected to constant artillery bombardment and repeated infantry assaults, the garrison held. American paratroopers, many veterans of D-Day and Market Garden, refused to consider surrender. Tank destroyers and anti-tank guns positioned at road approaches knocked out German armor at point-blank range. Artillery crews coordinated fire missions with mathematical precision, despite dwindling ammunition stocks. Weather conditions initially favored the Germans. Thick clouds and fog grounded Allied aircraft, eliminating the overwhelming air superiority that had supported Allied operations since D-Day. But this same weather created problems for German logistics. Snow-covered roads slowed supply columns, mud-trapped vehicles. The Ardennes terrain, chosen specifically because the Allies considered it unsuitable for major operations, proved equally difficult for German forces. Roads became bottlenecks where destroyed vehicles blocked entire columns. American logistics demonstrated qualitative superiority from the start. While German units scrounged for fuel and ammunition, American supply systems adapted rapidly to crisis. The famous Red Ball Express, truck convoy system that had supplied Allied armies since the Normandy breakout, reversed direction and began delivering supplies to units moving into the Ardennes. American depots in France held vast stocks of equipment, fuel, and ammunition, reserves that German planners never imagined existed. Within 72 hours of the offensive's start, American forces in the threatened sector were better supplied than the attacking German armies. December 23, 1944, brought clear skies to the Ardennes. For the first time since the offensive began, Allied aircraft could operate. The result was catastrophic for German forces. Over 5,000 Allied sorties flew that day, attacking German columns, supply lines, and assembly areas. P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings strafed anything that moved. B-26 Marauders bombed road junctions and bridges. The Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, attempted to contest Allied air superiority, but was hopelessly outnumbered. The ratio was approximately 10 Allied aircraft for every German plane. Transport aircraft dropped supplies to the besieged garrison at Bastogne. C-47 cargo planes, flying through anti-aircraft fire, delivered ammunition, medical supplies, and desperately needed artillery shells. This aerial resupply sustained the defense until ground relief arrived. German forces surrounding Bastogne could only watch helplessly as American transport planes circled overhead, dropping supplies by parachute within the American perimeter. The contrast was absolute. American logistics functioned even when ground lines were cut, while German supply columns sat motionless on roads, strafed repeatedly by Allied fighters. The impact of Allied air power extended far beyond tactical destruction. German troops, accustomed to moving and fighting under constant threat from above, experienced severe psychological strain. Soldiers abandoned vehicles at the first sound of aircraft engines, columns scattered into forests, losing precious time. Night movement became mandatory, further slowing the offensive's pace. One captured German officer's diary recorded, "The planes, always the planes, they come in waves. Our men call them the Terror. We cannot move by day, we cannot concentrate our forces, every road becomes a death trap." Statistical analysis reveals the air campaign's devastating effectiveness. In the week following December 23rd, Allied aircraft destroyed over 500 German vehicles, 75 tanks, and countless supply trucks. But mere numbers understate the impact. Destroyed vehicles blocked roads, creating impassable barriers. Burning fuel trucks consumed gasoline that panzer divisions desperately needed. Every destroyed supply column meant German frontline units went hungry, ran low on ammunition, and could not refuel their tanks. The offensive, already behind schedule, ground to a halt. Meanwhile, American ground forces prepared their counteroffensive. General George Patton's Third Army, fighting in the Saar region south of the Ardennes, executed one of the most impressive military maneuvers of the war. Within 48 hours, Patton disengaged 3 divisions from active combat, rotated them 90 degrees north, and sent them marching toward Bastogne. This redeployment covered over 100 miles in winter conditions, moving approximately 80,000 men with all their equipment, vehicles, and supplies. German staff officers analyzing the movement could not believe the speed. Their own doctrine considered such rapid redeployment impossible. Patton's spearhead, 4th Armored Division, attacked north toward Bastogne on December 22nd. Progress was difficult. German forces defending the approaches to Bastogne fought with desperate determination. Every village became a battle. Every ridge required an assault. American casualties mounted as units pushed forward through snow and mud, but American logistics ensured that attacking units never lacked ammunition, fuel, or replacements. Sherman tanks, knocked out in combat, were replaced within hours. Artillery battalions fired thousands of rounds daily, their ammunition trucks arriving with mechanical regularity. On December 26th, 4th Armored Division's 37th Tank Battalion broke through German encirclement and linked up with Bastogne's defenders. The siege was lifted. American soldiers embraced as relief columns entered the town. McAuliffe's garrison had held for 7 days, against overwhelming odds. The defense of Bastogne became a symbol of American determination. The town German commanders promised to capture within a day, held out long enough for relief to arrive. The contrast between German expectations and American performance could not have been starker. German logistical failures accelerated as the offensive stalled. Panzer divisions advancing west had outrun their supply lines by Christmas. The Germans had planned to capture American fuel dumps, but defenders destroyed most stocks before retreating. German tanks, averaging less than 2 miles per gallon, consumed fuel at rates that made long-range operations impossible without resupply. By December 25th, multiple panzer units reported they were immobilized due to empty fuel tanks. The most technologically advanced tanks in the German arsenal sat motionless, useless metal hulks, while their crews waited desperately for fuel trucks that never arrived. The contrast with American logistics was mathematically overwhelming. American forces in Europe consumed approximately 800,000 gallons of gasoline daily. Supply systems delivered this fuel reliably through a combination of pipelines, rail transport, and truck convoys. When German offensive threatened supply routes, American logistics adapted within days. Alternative routes opened. Stockpiles were repositioned. The flow of supplies never ceased. German forces, by comparison, operated on desperately thin margins. When initial supplies were exhausted and captured stocks failed to materialize, the offensive simply stopped moving. Individual German units experienced catastrophic supply failures. 6th Panzer Army's 1st SS Panzer Division, spearheading the northern attack, advanced approximately 50 miles before running out of fuel near Stoumont. The division's commander, SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper, abandoned most of his tanks and retreated on foot with surviving troops. Over 100 German armored vehicles were left behind, undamaged but immobile. American forces recovered these vehicles intact, a propaganda windfall demonstrating that German technical sophistication meant nothing without fuel to operate the machines. Artillery ammunition shortages plagued German forces throughout the offensive. Wehrmacht artillery doctrine called for extensive preparatory bombardments and continuous fire support. But ammunition supplies could not sustain such expenditure. By late December, German artillery units were rationing shells, firing only at the most critical targets. American artillery, by contrast, operated under no such restrictions. Forward observers called in fire missions freely, knowing that ammunition trucks would arrive within hours to replenish stocks. The mathematical advantage was staggering. American artillery fired approximately 10 shells for every German round, creating a firepower superiority that broke German attacks before they could develop. Food supplies created additional problems. German rations, already reduced by years of attrition warfare, provided barely adequate nutrition. Troops fighting in winter conditions required additional calories, but supply systems could not deliver them. Captured German soldiers reported that units had gone days without hot food, subsisting on hard bread and cold soup. American soldiers, even though surrounded at Bastogne before resupply, had access to sea rations that provided adequate nutrition. Once relieved, American units received hot meals daily. The contrast affected combat effectiveness directly. Hungry soldiers fight poorly, and German troops were increasingly hungry. Medical supplies demonstrated the same pattern. American medical units operated with abundant equipment, pharmaceuticals, and trained personnel. Casualty evacuation systems functioned efficiently, with wounded soldiers reaching aid stations within hours and field hospitals within a day. German medical services, by comparison, struggled with severe shortages. Morphine was unavailable, plasma supplies ran out. Many wounded German soldiers received only minimal care before being evacuated to overcrowded field hospitals far behind the lines. The human cost of logistical failure was measured in unnecessary suffering and preventable deaths. Weather, initially Germany's ally, became neutral by late December and then turned decisively against the offensive. Clear skies allowed Allied air operations. Moderate temperatures melted snow, turning roads into mud that mired vehicles. The Meuse River, German objective, remained beyond reach. Panzer spearheads had advanced approximately 60 miles at their deepest penetration, halfway to the river, far short of Antwerp. Every mile gained had cost irreplaceable men, tanks, and supplies. German commanders began receiving reports that made victory impossible. The offensive was failing. American counterattacks intensified throughout late December. Third Army's advance from the south compressed German forces between multiple threats. First Army, defending the northern shoulder of the Bulge, began pushing south. German units found themselves caught between converging American forces, their flanks increasingly exposed, their supply situation desperate. The offensive that was supposed to split Allied armies now faced encirclement itself. German commanders began requesting permission to withdraw to more defensible positions. Hitler refused. He demanded that every foot of ground be held, that the offensive continued despite mounting evidence of failure. This insistence on holding untenable positions led to needless casualties. German units fought skillfully, but skill could not overcome fundamental disadvantages in supply, air support, and reinforcement. American forces attacked with growing confidence, knowing that their logistics could sustain operations indefinitely while German resources dwindled daily. By December 28th, the German offensive's high watermark was reached and passed. No German unit advanced further west. All momentum belonged to American forces. Patton's Third Army expanded the corridor to Bastogne, pushing German forces back from the town's approaches. Fighting remained fierce. German soldiers continued resisting stubbornly, but the strategic initiative had shifted decisively. American commanders now planned not merely to contain the Bulge, but to eliminate it entirely, destroying German forces caught within the salient. The battles that followed demonstrated American tactical learning. Early in the offensive, inexperienced American units had been overwhelmed by veteran German troops using infiltration tactics and combined arms coordination. But American forces adapted rapidly. Small unit leaders learned to coordinate infantry, armor, and artillery effectively. Defensive positions improved as soldiers gained experience. Communication networks were re-established and strengthened. The same German tactics that succeeded on December 16th failed by year's end because American defenders had learned to counter them. American artillery proved particularly decisive. Forward observers accompanied infantry and armor units, calling in fire missions continuously. American artillery doctrine emphasized massed fires, multiple battalions concentrating on single targets to maximize destructive effect. The time-on target technique, where multiple batteries fired so their shells arrived simultaneously, delivered devastating barrages that German forces could not escape. One captured German officer testified, "Your artillery was the most terrible thing we faced. It was constant, accurate, overwhelming. We could not mass our forces without your shells falling upon us." Tank combat revealed technological and numerical advantages favoring American forces. The M4 Sherman, often disparaged as inferior to German tanks in armor and firepower, proved superior in reliability, mechanical simplicity, and, most critically, numbers. For every German tank knocked out, American armored units received replacements within days. German panzer divisions, suffering losses they could not replace, grew weaker with each engagement. By early January, some German panzer divisions fielded fewer than 20 operational tanks, compared to authorized strengths exceeding 100. American industrial production provided the foundation for every tactical advantage. In December 1944 alone, American factories produced approximately 2,000 tanks, 1,500 artillery pieces, and over 200,000 trucks. German production in the same month totaled fewer than 300 tanks and limited quantities of other equipment. The numerical disparity was unsurmountable. Every tank destroyed in the Ardennes could be replaced from American production lines. German losses were permanent. The mathematics of attrition warfare favored the side with greater industrial capacity, and American capacity exceeded German production by orders of magnitude. Personnel replacement systems followed similar patterns. American divisions suffering heavy casualties received trained replacements from depots in France and Britain. These replacement soldiers, though often inadequately prepared for frontline combat, filled out depleted units and allowed divisions to remain combat effective. German replacement systems had collapsed. Most German divisions in the Ardennes fought at reduced strength, their losses creating gaps that could not be filled. January 1, 1945, German forces launched Operation Nordwind, an offensive in Alsace intended to support the failing Ardennes attack. This secondary offensive aimed to relieve pressure on German forces in Belgium by forcing American commanders to divert reserves southward. The attack achieved initial tactical surprise, but lacked the resources to sustain momentum. American 7th Army, defending Alsace, conducted a fighting withdrawal and established defensive positions that contained the German advance within days. Nordwind demonstrated that Germany retained offensive capability but lacked the strength to achieve strategic objectives. In the Ardennes, American forces transitioned from defense to offense. General Courtney Hodges' 1st Army attacked from the north, while Patton's 3rd Army pushed from the south, aiming to pinch off the Bulge and trap German forces within. Progress was slow. German troops defended skillfully, contesting every village and ridge, but American advances were methodical and relentless. Artillery preparation preceded infantry assaults. Tank destroyers provided anti-armor support. Engineers cleared mines and demolished obstacles. The steady accumulation of small gains produced strategic results. Weather continued affecting operations. Snowstorms reduced visibility, grounded aircraft, and made movement difficult for both sides. Temperatures dropped below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Soldiers fought in conditions that caused frostbite, trench foot, and hypothermia. Both armies suffered non-combat casualties from cold weather, but American medical services treated cold injuries more effectively than German counterparts. American supply systems delivered winter clothing, boots, and cold weather equipment. German soldiers increasingly lacked proper winter gear, their suffering aggravated by supply failures. German casualties mounted at unsustainable rates. Infantry divisions that entered the offensive with 12,000 men were reduced to 3,000 or 4,000 effective combatants. Panzer divisions reported single-digit operational tank counts. Artillery battalions rationed ammunition so severely that fire support became ineffective. Personnel losses could not be replaced. Equipment losses exceeded production. Supply shortages worsened daily. The Wehrmacht was being ground down by attrition warfare it could not win. American intelligence intercepted increasingly desperate German communications. Radio messages revealed units requesting permission to retreat, reporting critical shortages, describing collapsing morale. German officers acknowledged that the offensive had failed and that continued fighting would only increase casualties without achieving objectives. But Hitler's headquarters continued demanding fanatical resistance. German troops, caught between impossible orders from above and overwhelming pressure from American forces, fought on with dwindling hope. By mid-January, the Bulge was being systematically eliminated. American forces advancing from north and south linked up near Houffalize on January 16th, cutting off German retreat routes. Approximately 30,000 German soldiers were trapped in the pocket, though most managed to escape eastward before American encirclement was complete. The battle's final phase saw German forces conducting fighting withdrawals, attempting to salvage equipment and extract as many troops as possible, while American forces pursued aggressively. The human cost of the offensive became clear as American forces recaptured occupied territory. Villages that changed hands multiple times were reduced to rubble. Belgian civilians emerged from cellars where they had sheltered during the fighting, their homes destroyed, their possessions lost. American military government teams provided emergency relief, food, medical care, shelter to displaced civilian populations. The contrast between German occupation and American liberation demonstrated the war's fundamental nature. One side brought destruction, the other brought aid and reconstruction. American soldiers discovered evidence of German war crimes during the campaign. Near Malmedy, bodies of American prisoners massacred by German troops on December 17th were found in snow-covered fields. 84 American soldiers had been murdered after surrendering. This atrocity hardened American resolve. Units that might have accepted German surrenders fought more ruthlessly. The massacre demonstrated that Wehrmacht forces, despite propaganda portraying them as honorable soldiers, participated in criminal acts. American military authorities documented these crimes meticulously, preserving evidence for future war crimes trials. Statistical analysis of the Battle of the Bulge reveals staggering disparities between German hopes and actual results. The offensive was supposed to destroy 30 Allied divisions, capture over 100,000 prisoners, and seize Antwerp within 2 weeks. Reality: 0 Allied divisions destroyed, 30,000 Americans captured, but most during the first 3 days before defenses stabilized. Antwerp never seriously threatened. The Meuse River, immediate German objective, never reached. Total strategic failure. Casualty figures demonstrate the offensive's cost. German armed forces suffered approximately 100,000 casualties, killed, wounded, captured, or missing. American casualties totaled approximately 81,000, including 19,000 killed. But these raw numbers obscure the critical difference. American losses could be replaced quickly through functioning replacement systems, while German losses were irreplaceable. Every veteran German soldier killed or captured represented years of training and combat experience lost permanently. Every destroyed Tiger tank meant one fewer available anywhere on all fronts. Germany was trading irreplaceable assets for temporary tactical gains that achieved nothing strategically. Equipment losses reveal similar patterns. German forces lost approximately 600 tanks and assault guns in the Ardennes, approximately 30% of all German armor on the Western Front. American losses totaled approximately 730 tanks. But American production in January and February 1945 delivered over 3,000 replacement tanks to European theater. The mathematical imbalance was crushing. Germany's industrial base, devastated by strategic bombing and deprived of raw materials, could not replace losses. America's factories, operating at full capacity and safety 3,000 miles from the front lines, produced unlimited replacements. Fuel consumption statistics illustrate logistical disparities. German forces consumed approximately 4 million gallons of gasoline. During the offensive, nearly half of Wehrmacht reserves on all fronts. This fuel enabled approximately 60 miles of advance at maximum penetration, achieved temporary tactical success, and was then exhausted. American forces defending and counterattacking consumed approximately 20 million gallons during the same period, supplied continuously through functioning logistics systems that delivered fuel as needed without depleting strategic reserves. The 5-to-1 consumption ratio actually understated American logistical superiority because American supplies were unlimited while German stocks were finite. Artillery ammunition expenditure followed the same pattern. German artillery fired approximately 5 million rounds during the entire offensive. American artillery defending the Ardennes fired approximately 4 million rounds in the first 10 days alone, then continued sustained fire throughout January at rates German forces could not match. American ammunition trucks arrived continuously, their cargo distributed efficiently to firing batteries. German ammunition trucks, when they arrived at all, carried insufficient quantities to sustain fire missions. The quantitative advantage in artillery firepower translated directly into tactical superiority. Air operations statistics demonstrate complete Allied dominance once weather permitted flying. Allied aircraft flew over 36,000 sorties during the battle. German Luftwaffe managed approximately 3,000 sorties total. The 12-to-1 ratio in sortie numbers actually understated Allied air superiority, because Allied aircraft carried greater bomb loads, had superior training, and operated from well-supplied airfields where maintenance and fuel were abundant. German aircraft operated from improvised fields with inadequate supplies and exhausted pilots, flying obsolete machines against overwhelming opposition. The impossible statistic that defined the Battle of the Bulge. In December 1944, American factories produced more military equipment than the entire German economy produced in all of 1944. 1 month of American production exceeded 1 year of German production. This industrial supremacy made German victory mathematically impossible. Every German tank destroyed was gone forever. Every American tank destroyed was replaced within days. Every German soldier killed left a permanent gap. Every American casualty was replaced by trained personnel from inexhaustible reserves. The Wehrmacht was fighting American industry as much as the American army, and industry proved the decisive weapon. German military leadership recognized the offensive's failure by mid-January. Field commanders sent increasingly pessimistic reports to higher headquarters, describing exhausted troops, depleted units, and impossible situations. General von Rundstedt requested permission to withdraw German forces to defensible positions behind the Rhine River. Hitler refused, as always, demanding that every meter of ground be held regardless of cost. This inflexibility guaranteed that German losses would continue mounting without any possibility of achieving meaningful objectives. The German withdrawal from the Ardennes Bulge began January 28, 1945, over 6 weeks after the offensive started. Retreat operations attempted to salvage equipment and extract surviving troops while conducting rearguard actions to slow American pursuit. These delaying actions demonstrated continued German tactical competence. Small units fought skillfully, imposing casualties on advancing American forces, but operational level collapse was irreversible. German units retreated eastward toward the German border, abandoning their furthest penetrations and giving up territory purchased with blood. American forces pursued methodically rather than recklessly. Commanders prioritized minimizing friendly casualties over rapid advance. Artillery prepared every attack. Airstrikes hit German positions ahead of ground forces. Infantry and armor coordinated their movements carefully. This deliberate approach proved effective. German forces were driven back steadily, while American casualties remained manageable. The pursuit demonstrated professional competence. American commanders had learned from earlier mistakes and now applied combined arms tactics efficiently. By February 7, 1945, American forces had retaken all territory lost during the German offensive. The front lines returned to positions held on December 15th. The Bulge was eliminated. But German losses could not be recovered. Wehrmacht's strength in the west was permanently weakened. Divisions that fought in the Ardennes were shadows of their former effectiveness. Panzer divisions reported tank strengths in single digits. Infantry divisions had become regiment-sized formations. Artillery battalions lacked both ammunition and serviceable guns. The German armed forces had gambled everything on a desperate offensive and lost catastrophically. Strategic consequences extended far beyond the Ardennes battlefield. The offensive consumed Germany's last mobile reserves. These troops and equipment, wasted in the failed offensive, were unavailable to defend against the coming Allied offensives into Germany itself. When American and British forces attacked across the Rhine in March, German opposition was noticeably weaker because elite units had been destroyed in the Ardennes. When Soviet forces launched their final offensive toward Berlin in April, Wehrmacht reserves that might have delayed the Red Army were gone, expended in Belgium, achieving nothing. Economic analysis reveals the offensive's impact on German war production. The approximately 4 million gallons of fuel consumed in the Ardennes represented petroleum that German factories desperately needed. Aircraft production, tank production, and chemical manufacturing all suffered from fuel shortages. During January and February 1945, because the Ardennes offensive consumed so much gasoline, the 600 tanks lost in Belgium were tanks unavailable to defend the Rhine crossings or oppose Soviet advances in the east. Every artillery shell fired in the Ardennes was one shell unavailable for later battles, when defensive firepower might have delayed inevitable defeat. American strategic position improved dramatically after defeating the German offensive. Allied High Command, briefly concerned that the German attack might delay plans for crossing the Rhine, now recognized that German offensive capability was broken. Planning for final operations into Germany accelerated. Eisenhower scheduled Rhine crossings for March, confident that German resistance would be weakened by Ardennes losses. British and American staffs coordinated advances designed to encircle and destroy remaining German forces west of the Rhine, then drive rapidly into Germany's industrial heartland. The German armed forces never recovered from the Battle of the Bulge. The offensive destroyed Germany's last operational reserves in the west, consumed irreplaceable fuel and ammunition stocks, and achieved no strategic objectives whatsoever. Hitler's gamble failed completely. The road to Berlin lay open to Allied armies, advancing from both east and west. The final Allied offensive into Germany began March 7, 1945, when American forces captured the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen intact. This unexpected prize provided a bridgehead across the Rhine River, Germany's last natural defensive barrier. Within 24 hours, 8,000 American troops crossed the bridge before German engineers finally destroyed it. But by then, American engineers had constructed pontoon bridges nearby. ensuring continuous flow of men and equipment into Germany proper. The Rhine crossing, accomplished with minimal casualties, demonstrated how thoroughly the Battle of the Bulge had weakened German defensive capabilities. Multiple Rhine crossings followed rapidly. British and Canadian forces crossed in Operation Plunder on March 23rd. Patton's Third Army crossed near Oppenheim on March 22nd, before elaborate British preparations were complete. American Seventh Army crossed near Worms on March 26th. Each crossing encountered resistance, but German forces lacked the strength to contain the bridgeheads. Allied engineers constructed numerous bridges, allowing armor and artillery to cross in overwhelming numbers. By early April, over 1 million Allied troops were operating east of the Rhine, advancing into Germany's industrial heartland. German resistance, though determined in places, could not slow Allied advances significantly. Wehrmacht divisions defending the Rhine and beyond were skeletal formations, under strength, and poorly equipped. The mobile reserves that might have counterattacked Allied bridgeheads had been destroyed in the Ardennes. Artillery units lacked ammunition for sustained fire. Luftwaffe appearances over the battlefield were rare. Fuel shortages, pilot casualties, and overwhelming Allied air superiority meant German aircraft could accomplish little. The German armed forces retained tactical competence but lacked operational capability to mount effective defense. The Ruhr pocket encirclement, completed April 1, 1945, trapped over 300,000 German soldiers in Germany's industrial core. American First and Ninth Armies linked up east of the Ruhr, surrounding Army Group B, commanded by Field Marshal Walter Model. These trapped forces included many units that had fought in the Ardennes. Now caught in an encirclement they lacked strength to break. Model, recognizing the hopelessness of his situation, dissolved his headquarters on April 15th and committed suicide 6 days later. Over 317,000 German soldiers surrendered when the pocket was eliminated, a larger capitulation than Stalingrad. American forces advanced rapidly across central Germany during April. Resistance was sporadic. Some German units fought fanatically, defending meaningless positions long after rational military judgment would have dictated retreat. Other units surrendered readily, their soldiers exhausted and disillusioned. German civilians, recognizing that the war was lost, generally did not resist Allied occupation. Many Germans welcomed American and British forces, preferring Western occupation to the Red Army advancing from the east. The contrast between American logistics in Germany and German logistical collapse was absolute. American supply columns moved freely on German autobahns, delivering fuel, ammunition, and food to advancing units. German forces, by comparison, could barely feed their own troops. Civilians in occupied German cities received food from American military government supplies. The conquerors fed the conquered because German distribution systems had ceased functioning. American industrial superiority, demonstrated decisively in the Ardennes, now manifested in occupied Germany as organizational competence that provided order amid chaos. Soviet forces advancing from the east reached Berlin before Western allies, surrounding the German capital by April 25th. American and Soviet troops met at the Elbe River on the same day, cutting Germany in half. Hitler committed suicide on April 30th. Admiral Karl Dönitz, Hitler's designated successor, attempted to negotiate separate peace with Western allies while continuing resistance against Soviets. This stratagem failed. Eisenhower demanded unconditional surrender on all fronts simultaneously. On May 7, 1945, German armed forces surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe ended officially at 11:01 p.m. on May 8, 1945. Production statistics from the war years reveal the industrial foundation of Allied victory. American factories produced approximately 96,000 tanks between 1942 and 1945. German production totaled approximately 46,000 tanks during the entire war. The 2-to-1 American advantage understated actual superiority because American tanks were more reliable, more easily repaired, and supported by abundant spare parts. German tanks, though often superior in firepower and armor, broke down frequently and could not be repaired due to parts shortages. Aircraft production disparities were even more dramatic. American factories built approximately 300,000 aircraft during the war years. German production reached approximately 120,000 aircraft total. The 3-to-1 production ratio translated into overwhelming air superiority. Allied aircraft controlled the skies over every battlefield from mid-1943 onward. German pilots, though often skillful, flew obsolete aircraft against numerically superior opponents who had better training, more fuel for practice, and replacement aircraft available whenever needed. Artillery and ammunition production demonstrated similar patterns. American factories produced approximately 257,000 artillery pieces during the war. German production totaled approximately 160,000 guns. But the real disparity appeared in ammunition. American factories produced over 41 billion rounds of small arms ammunition and over 477 million artillery shells. German production of ammunition never approached American levels. This quantitative advantage meant American forces could fire freely, knowing resupply would arrive continuously, while German forces rationed every bullet. Truck production reveals logistical foundations of American military power. American factories built approximately 2.6 million military trucks during the war. German production totaled approximately 346,000 trucks. The 7-to-1 advantage in truck production enabled American logistics systems to function at continental scale. Every American division had organic truck transport. Supply chains extended thousands of miles from factories to front lines without breaking. German forces, chronically short of trucks, relied heavily on horse-drawn transport throughout the war. An industrial-age army fought a mechanized opponent and lost for predictable reasons. Naval construction demonstrated American shipbuilding capacity. Liberty ships, mass-produced cargo vessels, were built at rates that seemed impossible. At peak production, American shipyards launched 3 Liberty ships daily. Total production exceeded 2,700 vessels, each capable of carrying 10,000 tons of cargo. German U-boats sank Allied shipping throughout the war, but American shipyards built replacement tonnage faster than submarines could sink it. By 1944, Allied shipping tonnage exceeded pre-war levels, despite years of submarine warfare. The mathematics of industrial attrition warfare favored the side with greater production capacity. The impossible statistic that defined the Second World War's industrial dimension: American factories in 1944 alone produced more war material than the German economy produced during the entire war. From 1939 to 1945, 1 year of American production exceeded 6 years of German production. This disparity made Axis victory impossible once America fully mobilized its industrial base. Germany fought not just the American military, but American industry, and industry proved decisively more powerful than military tradition or tactical skill. Steel production underpinned all other manufacturing. American steel mills produced approximately 89 million tons of steel in 1944. German production that year totaled approximately 28 million tons. The 3-to-1 advantage in steel production meant American factories had raw materials to build unlimited quantities of tanks, ships, aircraft, weapons, and ammunition. German factories, restricted by limited steel production, had to choose which weapons to prioritize. Every Tiger tank produced meant fewer trucks. Every U-boat meant fewer aircraft. Resource allocation became a zero-sum game Germany could not win. American industrial workers, largely women replacing men drafted into military service, worked in factories that operated around the clock. The famous Rosie the Riveter represented millions of American women who built the weapons that won the war. German factories, heavily damaged by Allied strategic bombing and deprived of raw materials, could not match American production rates. By war's end, German industrial output had collapsed to approximately 20% of 1944 levels. American production continued increasing until victory was achieved. The Battle of the Bulge's legacy extended far beyond the Ardennes battlefield. For the German armed forces, the offensive represented the final expenditure of offensive capability. Mobile reserves were destroyed, elite panzer divisions were reduced to remnants, fuel stocks were exhausted, ammunition reserves were consumed. The Wehrmacht retained defensive capability. German soldiers fought skillfully in defense until war's end, but could never again mount major offensive operations. The road to Berlin was open because Germany's last reserves died in Belgian snows. For American forces, the battle demonstrated institutional learning and adaptability. Units that panicked during the first German attacks learned to fight effectively against veteran opponents. Supply systems adapted to crisis and maintained flow of equipment to combat units. Commanders at all levels demonstrated flexibility and initiative. The same American army that nearly broke in December became a confident professional force that advanced into Germany 3 months later. The transformation demonstrated that American military institutions could learn from mistakes and apply lessons rapidly. Individual American soldiers proved their worth in ways that German propaganda never anticipated. The garrison at Bastogne, surrounded and outnumbered, refused to surrender. Small units throughout the Ardennes fought delaying actions that disrupted outdated German timetables. Tank crews faced superior German armor and found ways to win through superior tactics and determination. Infantry soldiers endured winter conditions and kept fighting. German assessments that American soldiers were soft and lacking in combat motivation proved catastrophically wrong. The contrast between American and German military cultures emerged clearly during the battle. American commanders demonstrated flexibility, adapting plans to changing circumstances and delegating authority to subordinates. German commanders followed orders rigidly even when circumstances made those orders obsolete. American logistics systems adapted to crisis efficiently. German logistics followed plans that became irrelevant when assumptions proved false. American military culture rewarded initiative and problem-solving. German military culture demanded obedience regardless of tactical reality. These cultural differences contributed significantly to final outcomes. For Belgium's civilian population, the battle brought suffering and destruction. Over 3,000 Belgian civilians died during the fighting. Towns and villages were destroyed, families were displaced. The brief return of German occupation reminded Belgians of the oppression they had endured since 1940. Liberation by American forces in January brought relief and gratitude. Belgian civilians welcomed American soldiers as liberators who had driven out oppressors at great cost. The relationship between American forces and Belgian civilians during the battle created lasting bonds between the two nations. Historical analysis recognizes the Battle of the Bulge as Germany's last major offensive in the West and a decisive Allied victory. The offensive failed to achieve any strategic objectives. German casualties could not be replaced. Equipment losses permanently weakened Wehrmacht combat power. Fuel and ammunition consumed in the Ardennes were unavailable for defending Germany itself. The offensive delayed Allied advance into Germany by approximately 6 weeks, but ensured that German resistance would be weaker when that advance resumed. Hitler's gamble achieved nothing except hastening Germany's final defeat. American casualties were significant: over 19,000 killed, 47,000 wounded, 15,000 captured or missing. But losses were replaced through functioning replacement systems. Divisions that fought in the Ardennes were brought back to strength and continued operations. Equipment losses were replaced from production lines operating in safety across the Atlantic. The American military's institutional resilience ensured that the Battle of the Bulge, though costly, did not impair operational capability. American forces emerged from the battle stronger and more confident than before. The Ardennes battlefield today is marked by monuments, cemeteries, and museums preserving memory of those who fought. American military cemeteries in Belgium hold thousands of white crosses marking graves of soldiers who died in the battle. Bastogne has become a pilgrimage site for those honoring American and Belgian sacrifice. The Madison Memorial, dedicated in 1950, honors American forces who fought in the Ardennes. Each December, ceremonies commemorate the battle and honor veterans. Memory of the battle remains vivid in Belgium, where the American role in liberation is deeply appreciated. The strategic consequences of the Battle of the Bulge extended throughout the final months of the war. German forces defending the Rhine River in March 1945 were weaker because elite units had been destroyed in the Ardennes. When Allied forces crossed the Rhine and advanced into Germany, opposition was lighter than expected because German mobile reserves were gone. The Ruhr Pocket encirclement trapped hundreds of thousands of German soldiers who might have delayed Allied advances if positioned differently. Every German casualty in the Ardennes was one fewer soldier defending Germany itself. The offensive weakened German defenses at the decisive moment. Soviet offensives in the east also benefited from German decisions in the west. Hitler refused to transfer troops from the Eastern Front to reinforce the Ardennes offensive, but the reverse transfers occurred. Units were pulled from the east to replace Western losses. When Soviet forces launched their final offensive toward Berlin in January 1945, German defenses were weaker because reserves had been consumed in Belgium. The Battle of the Bulge influenced military operations across all European fronts, weakening German positions everywhere through futile expenditure of limited resources. Post-war analysis by military historians consistently identifies the Battle of the Bulge as a catastrophic German strategic error. The offensive consumed resources desperately needed for defense. It provided no possibility of achieving stated objectives. German forces never seriously threatened Antwerp or came close to splitting Allied armies. The operation was based on wishful thinking rather than realistic assessment of capabilities. Hitler's insistence on attacking despite overwhelming evidence that Germany lacked resources for success exemplified the delusional strategic thinking that characterized Nazi leadership throughout the war. American military institutions learned valuable lessons from the battle. The importance of maintaining reserves became clear. American commanders who held back reserve forces could counterattack effectively, while those who committed everything to the front line risked disaster. The value of flexible logistics systems was demonstrated repeatedly. The need for air superiority was confirmed. Clear weather allowing Allied air operations proved decisive. These lessons informed American military doctrine throughout the Cold War and remain relevant today. The human stories emerging from the battle created lasting symbols of courage and determination. The defenders of Bastogne became legendary. McAuliffe's one-word reply to German surrender demands entered American cultural memory. Individual acts of heroism, soldiers holding positions against impossible odds, medics treating wounded under fire, engineers repairing bridges while under bombardment, demonstrated character that transcended nationality or ideology. German soldiers also fought bravely, their courage wasted in service of criminal regime pursuing impossible objectives. Respect for individual soldiers coexists with condemnation of the cause they served. Technological lessons from the battle influenced post-war military development. The importance of logistics and supply systems received renewed emphasis. American military planners recognized that overwhelming firepower required reliable supply chains to sustain. Tank design philosophy shifted toward reliability and ease of maintenance over maximum armor and firepower. The value of combined arms coordination, infantry, armor, artillery, and air power working together became doctrinal foundation for future operations. The Battle of the Bulge confirmed that modern warfare required integration of multiple capabilities rather than excellence in single domains. The contrast between democratic and totalitarian military systems emerged clearly from the battle's outcome. American military culture, which encouraged initiative, rewarded problem-solving, and trusted subordinate commanders, proved superior to German military culture that demanded unquestioning obedience even when orders were obsolete. American industrial democracy outproduced German totalitarian economy by overwhelming margins. American logistics, built on civilian expertise and organizational flexibility, functioned far more effectively than German systems designed for rigid control. The Battle of the Bulge demonstrated that free societies, when threatened, could mobilize resources and willpower exceeding anything authoritarian regimes could achieve. The legacy of the Battle of the Bulge endures in memory, monument, and meaning. For the generation that fought the war, the battle represented a testing moment, when American soldiers proved their worth against veteran opponents and prevailed. For historians, the battle exemplifies industrial warfare's mathematics, superior production, logistics, and resources overcome tactical skill and military tradition. For nations involved, the battle remains a symbol of sacrifice, liberation, and the cost of defending freedom against tyranny. American veterans of the Ardennes carried memories of that brutal winter throughout their lives. They remembered bitter cold, constant danger, friends lost, and the satisfaction of hard-won victory. Veterans organizations maintained connections forged in combat. Annual reunions brought together men who fought in the same units, shared the same hardships, and survived the same dangers. As that generation aged and passed, their stories were preserved by historians, families, and institutions dedicated to maintaining memory of their service. Belgian gratitude toward American forces remained strong across generations. The people of Bastogne and surrounding communities never forgot that American soldiers liberated them from German occupation twice. Once in September 1944, again in January 1945, Belgian citizens maintained American military graves, placed flowers on headstones, and ensured that American sacrifice was honored. Educational programs taught Belgian children about the battle and American role in their country's liberation. This sustained gratitude created enduring friendship between Belgium and the United States. The physical landscape of the Ardennes still bears marks of the battle 80 years later. Forests where soldiers fought have regrown, but local residents occasionally discover unexploded ordnance, rusted equipment, or foxholes dug during the fighting. Historical societies preserve battlefield sites, placing markers that explain tactical situations and commemorate units that fought there. Museums display artifacts recovered from battlefields, weapons, uniforms, equipment, personal effects. These physical remnants connect present generations to past events, making history tangible and immediate. Military professionals continue studying the Battle of the Bulge for lessons applicable to contemporary warfare. The importance of intelligence and avoiding surprise, the value of maintaining operational reserves, the decisive impact of air superiority, the criticality of logistics and supply systems, the need for flexibility and initiative at all command levels. These lessons, learned at great cost in Belgian snows, inform military education and doctrine today. Staff colleges analyze the battle's campaigns, teaching officers how decisions made under stress influenced outcomes. The contrast between abundance and shortage, central theme throughout the battle, reflected deeper differences between American and German societies at war. American democracy mobilized industrial capacity voluntarily through appeals to patriotism and shared sacrifice. German totalitarianism extracted resources through coercion and slave labor, systems that proved less efficient than voluntary cooperation. American logistics systems, staffed by trained civilians in uniform, functioned more effectively than German systems designed for authoritarian control. The battle demonstrated that free peoples, organizing voluntarily to defend their values, created more effective institutions than societies organized through fear and compulsion. The final assessment of the Battle of the Bulge recognizes both German tactical skill and American strategic superiority. German soldiers fought skillfully and bravely, but their efforts served flawed strategy conceived by leadership detached from reality. American soldiers, initially surprised and outnumbered, adapted and prevailed through determination backed by overwhelming material support. Individual courage mattered on both sides. But courage alone could not overcome the fundamental imbalance between nations. One possessed unlimited industrial capacity and functioning logistics, the other exhausted itself in futile offensive that accelerated inevitable defeat. In the end, the Battle of the Bulge proved what total war between industrial powers means. Production capacity matters more than individual heroism. Logistics determines outcomes more surely than tactical brilliance. Sustainable supply systems defeat unsustainable operations. The Wehrmacht, for all its skill and tradition, could not overcome simple mathematics. American factories produced more tanks, aircraft, trucks, and ammunition than German industry could match. Every German tank destroyed was gone forever. Every American tank destroyed was replaced within days. This equation, repeated across thousands of engagements, produced inevitable outcome. The Germans mocked American soldiers as inexperienced and soft, lacking the will to fight. They underestimated resolve, adaptability, and institutional learning. They misunderstood that American military power rested not on Prussian tradition, but on industrial democracy's capacity to mobilize resources and organize logistics. They failed to comprehend that free peoples defending their values could match or exceed any authoritarian regime's fanaticism. These miscalculations cost Germany its last offensive capability and hastened final defeat. The American flag flies today over the Bastogne Memorial in Bastogne, over American military cemeteries in Belgium, and over monuments throughout the Ardennes. It symbolizes sacrifice of soldiers who fought in brutal conditions and prevailed. It represents gratitude of peoples liberated from oppression. It embodies values defended at great cost: freedom, democracy, and dignity of individual human life. The Battle of the Bulge showed that these values, backed by industrial might and determined soldiers, could overcome tyranny. That lesson endures. In December 1944, German forces attacked with confidence, expecting quick victory over demoralized opponents. By January 1945, those same German forces retreated in defeat, their strength broken, their resources exhausted. American soldiers, mocked as soft and inexperienced, proved resilient and adaptable. American industry, dismissed as unable to produce quality equipment, delivered overwhelming quantities of reliable weapons. American logistics, considered impossible to sustain across oceans and continents, functioned flawlessly throughout the crisis. The Germans underestimated everything about their opponent. They paid for that error with their last offensive capability and accelerated defeat. The Stars and Stripes flew over reconquered ground, symbol of victory earned through blood, determination, and the industrial might of free peoples united in common cause.